I think it's extraordinary that in part we're dealing with a 19th century legislation and that only part of the 215 Act was implemented. And one of the things that I have to find frustrating is that our ability to update legislation in good time seems to be very limited. I remember about 10 years ago, the present AG undertook a massive amount of work in trying to eliminate all pre-1922 legislation off the statute book. It's absolutely amazing that there is still legislation. I don't know if there's any left. He certainly had been driving this forward to eliminate it completely. But as we see here, we still have a bit left. That pre-independence legislation passed in the Parliament of Westminster, still, the writ still runs in this country. And it's not wrong because it was done then, but it's dated, crazily dated. In fact, my belief is that we need to then, when we get to 22, start doing another round and look at all the older legislation to see, is it fit for purpose? And when you look at the terminology, you just see how dated it is. Now, the second thing is, I remember one day, and it was my first direct experience of this assisted decision-making, somebody came in to my office and they were very, very upset that their daughter, who was intellectually disabled, wasn't able to make decisions for herself, even though she had very much her own mind, and that this legislation hadn't been implemented, that the 215 legislation. And I have to say, I utterly agreed with her. And it was at that point I started taking a real interest, not a very detailed, because there's one problem in this House. The hours of the day don't allow you to be totally engaged in every issue that comes in. But I am pleased that a bill is before the Dáil that deals with a lot of the issues. Maybe it doesn't deal with all of the issues, but that a bill is before the Dáil that will make 215 fully effective. And that will be in line with the United Nations Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I think it's a great thing that we're putting an end to the wars of court. I don't think that this is something to be decided in court except in extremis. But the day-to-day operation is much better with the Decision Support Service. The second thing I think we need to do is talk about legislation as a dynamic. So, ministers, if in 2 or 3 years' time there are unforeseen consequences that have arisen here, or issues that aren't working, I can't see any reason why we can't expedite amending legislation in, because it's very hard to get it perfect all the time. And until you actually operate something, sometimes it's impossible to find out what the unforeseen consequences are. One thing I would say, though, it's the actual operation, it's how it really works for real people on the ground that counts with me. It's not the theory of the law. It's, is it good? Does it serve well in practice? I remember reading somewhere that the Breton laws might look very strange, but they had one great value, and that is they were respected by the people, and the people of those times followed them because it was their law and it was reasonable to them. And I think we need to very much take law as a dynamic and not as, this is it, this is going to be it forever, and there are no flaws here. I've heard when people said, and I think they have a very valid point, about decision-making for people with who are confined under the Act. I don't know what, and I'm sure the ministers will explain the details of why it's not in it. But that, to me, is why we have two chambers here. It was one of the reasons that when we're talking about abolishing the Senate, I believe that it is very good to go through the bills twice in the Houses and tease out issues. Now, sometimes concerns people raise because of the intricacies of the law are found not to be as concerning as they might have thought. In other cases, there are real concerns. and they can be amended. And of course, I'd expect a very robust debate on that, and I would expect that the committee stage will be quite detailed. And the third situation is that a minister might go in and say, look, there's a whole issue to be dealt here with a whole lot of wider ramifications, and we will need a third piece of legislation to do that. But let's get this amount, 80 or 90% of the issue covered. And these are something I think we all have to listen to in the coming weeks. Because there's one thing certain. This is 100 years too late. In the shorter term, it's 7 years too late. And there is a time when you have to get on with what's there, but not close the door for further change, but consolidate the progress and move forward. And I think all of us had the experience here. I think the Lascan Corla would share that view that when we debated the languages bill, we're not 100% happy with the progress we made, but we're a lot happier than we were than no progress. And we'd see it as a work in progress, not as the final destination. And I would see this in the same terms, that this is a work in progress, that we need to keep building on this, building on people's rights, get the balance right. And again, all of us in our constituency work have seen the tricky balances involved in human relationships, in issues of capacity and so on, even in our own work. Can I finally say, I was very impressed listening to the director of the Decision Support Service on the radio yesterday. She gave a very good explanation of the intricacies of this, and that they can have assisted decision-making in certain facilities, and in other parts of people's life they would make their own decisions totally. So that is quite subtle part of this. And no doubt that those who will have the privilege to attend all the committee meetings, and unfortunately I can't see with the schedule I have that I'm going to be able to do that, that they'll be able to tease all these issues out in detail. But I do welcome the bill. I hope it does get passed, and more importantly, I hope it's fully implemented expeditiously, and that the ministers give a firm undertaking that if there are further issues to be dealt with, that it won't be another 7 years before we're back in the House to deal with those issues. Good morning. Let's conclude.